Listen, relax, and enjoy the journey.
1. Introduction. Every country needs money to run effectively. The government is responsible for managing this money. The primary way the government gets money is through tax. Tax is collected from every person and business in the country. This collected money is called the tax income. The tax income is used to pay for many essential services. These services include building new roads, funding the police force, paying teachers, and running hospitals like the National Health Service. This payment for services is called government spending. Governments always try to balance their income and their spending. However, sometimes the spending is much higher than the income. When this happens, the government has a financial shortage. To cover this shortage, the government must ask to borrow money from banks, financial institutions, or even from other countries. The total amount of money that the government has borrowed over time and has not yet paid back is called the national debt. When a country's debt is very large, it means the government owes a significant amount of money. For the United Kingdom today, the national debt is extremely high. It is almost the same size as all the money the country makes in one full year. This high level of debt did not happen quickly. It grew rapidly over the last 15 years because of several major events. These events were often sudden and required huge amounts of money to solve. The government had to borrow this money very quickly to protect the citizens and the economy. We will look closely at the main reasons why the UK's debt is so large today. We will study the costs related to saving banks during a global crisis, spending money to deal with a pandemic virus, helping people pay high energy bills, and the rising cost of living. This explanation aims to show the history of the country's finances. It is about understanding the facts of large government spending and necessary borrowing. It is not about blaming any specific group or political party. Understanding these events helps us see why managing the nation's money is a very difficult job today. The story begins with a major problem that affected the whole world in the year 2008. 2. Saving the banks. To understand the United Kingdom's debt today, we must look far back in time. The year was 2008. A major problem began that year. It was called the global financial crisis. This crisis was worldwide, affecting many countries, not just the UK. Banks are essential parts of the economy. People trust banks to keep their money safe. Businesses use banks for loans and daily work. But in 2008, many large banks had serious problems. They had made bad decisions, especially about lending money for houses. These choices were risky, and soon the banks started to lose huge amounts of money. They were close to failing completely. If banks fail, people lose their savings. If many banks fail at once, the whole financial system can break down. People would stop trusting the system, and the economy would stop working. Millions of ordinary people were worried about their money. The government decided it had to act very fast. They believed that the cost of letting the banks fail would be much higher than the cost of saving them. To save the banks and protect people's savings, the government needed money immediately. They did not have enough tax money saved for this purpose. So the government chose to borrow a very large sum of money. They borrowed from investors and other financial groups. This borrowed money was then given to the struggling banks. This action is often called a bailout. It kept the banks open and protected the money that people had saved. This was an extremely expensive decision. The government spent billions of pounds to rescue key financial institutions, such as the Royal Bank of Scotland and Lloyds Banking Group. By doing this, they stopped a complete disaster for the economy. However, this necessary action came with a large price tag. The money borrowed for the bailout was immediately added to the national debt. Before 2008, the debt level was much lower. The financial crisis caused the first major jump in the UK's debt. This event is a very important starting point. The large amount of money borrowed during the banking crisis in 2008 remains on the national account. This borrowing was done to protect citizens and the entire economy, but it meant the government started owing many more billions of pounds than ever before. This high debt level created a difficult financial situation that the country still deals with today. 3. The cost of the virus. In the year 2020, a new problem arrived. It was the COVID-19 virus. This virus spread very quickly around the world. It caused a global health crisis. The government had to act fast to protect people. This time of emergency required huge amounts of money, and the government had to borrow quickly. To stop the virus from spreading, the government made a difficult choice. They told people they must stay at home. This was called a lockdown. Shops, restaurants, and many businesses had to close their doors for many months. People could not go to work as normal. This meant that millions of people suddenly stopped earning money. This situation was bad for the economy, and families struggled to pay for food and rent. The government knew that people needed money to live. They created a special plan to help the workers and the businesses. This plan was called the furlough scheme. Under this scheme, the government promised to pay the wages of workers who could not work. They paid a large part of the salaries for millions of people. This kept families safe and helped them pay their essential bills. This decision was important to keep the country running, but it was also very costly. Paying millions of wages every month costs a huge amount of money. The furlough scheme alone cost many billions of pounds. This money did not come from taxes. It had to be borrowed from banks and investors. This sudden, massive spending pushed the national debt much higher very quickly. The government also needed to spend money on fighting the illness itself. They had to buy a lot of medical equipment. They needed special masks and protective clothing for doctors and nurses. They also had to buy new machines for hospitals to treat sick people. Later, when scientists created vaccines, the government had to pay for those too. They bought millions of doses of vaccines for almost everyone in the country. They also paid for testing kits so people could check if they had the virus. All these purchases were necessary to save lives, but they were extremely expensive. The pandemic caused the biggest increase in borrowing in a very long time. The government had to borrow money faster than ever before to cover the costs of the lockdown, the furlough scheme, and the medical supplies. The total cost of fighting the COVID-19 virus added hundreds of billions of pounds to the national debt. The debt grew very quickly in just 2 years. This large amount of new debt is one key reason why the United Kingdom owes so much money today. 4. Paying for energy. After the pandemic, the world faced a new and serious problem. In Eastern Europe, Russia invaded Ukraine. This war was far away from the United Kingdom, but it had a global effect. It damaged the world economy and caused big problems for energy supplies. The biggest problem was the price of energy. Gas and oil are needed to make electricity and heat homes. Because of the war, the price of gas went up very fast. The cost of electricity also increased sharply. This rise in prices was seen all around the world. Many families in the United Kingdom began to struggle. They needed gas to heat their houses in winter. They needed electricity for cooking and lights. The bills became too high for many people to pay. People worried every day about keeping their homes warm. Some families had to choose between buying food or paying their energy bills. The government saw that families needed urgent help. They knew that many people would be cold or lose power if they did nothing. So the government decided to step in and help people pay for their energy. They created a special plan to keep bills lower for homes and businesses. This help was called an energy subsidy. A subsidy means the government pays part of the cost for the customer. For example, if a family's bill was going to be £300, the government might pay £100 of that cost. This made the bills much cheaper and helped millions of people stay safe. However, this help was extremely expensive. The government did not have enough tax money saved to pay for the subsidies. The total cost reached many billions of pounds. To pay for this massive plan, the government had to borrow money again. This borrowing was added to the national debt. The debt was already very high because of the money spent saving the banks in 2008. It was also high because of the money borrowed during the virus pandemic. Now, the debt grew even larger because of the high cost of energy. This shows how quickly global events can force the government to spend huge amounts of money. 5. Prices go up. In the last few years, people have noticed something important. Everything costs more money. This rise in prices is called inflation. Inflation means that £1 buys less today than it did yesterday. This problem started after the pandemic and the high energy costs from the war. When companies pay more for gas and materials, they must charge customers more too. You see this change when you go shopping. The price of milk, bread, and vegetables has gone up quickly. Families must spend more of their monthly income just to buy food. People feel this change every day in their homes. But inflation does not only affect families. It affects the government too, because the government is a very large customer. The government buys many things. It buys steel for new bridges, concrete for roads, and computers for offices. When inflation is high, the cost of these materials increases quickly. Imagine the government planned to spend £1 million on a new road. If the price of concrete doubles, the government now needs £2 million for the same road. This makes planning very hard. The government sets a budget at the start of the year. This budget says how much money they will spend on different services, like health care or education. If prices rise by 10%, the government needs 10% more money just to provide the same services. They must spend more money just to stand still. Running schools becomes more expensive because the food for lunches costs more, and heating the building costs more. Building a new hospital that was planned 4 years ago now costs hundreds of millions of pounds extra. This extra cost was not in the original budget. To cover these unexpected high prices, the government often has to borrow even more money. High inflation makes it very difficult to reduce the national debt. The money the government collects in tax buys less every single day, forcing them to spend more to keep essential services running. 6. The cost of borrowing. When the government borrows money, it does not just pay back the original amount, it must also pay an extra fee. This extra money is called interest. Interest is the cost of borrowing money from banks or other countries. It is like renting money for a specific time. If the government borrows £100, it might have to pay back £105. The extra £5 is the interest interest. For many years, interest rates were very low. This was helpful for the government. The country's debt was large, but the yearly cost of managing that debt was small. It was cheap to borrow money and keep the debt. However, the economic situation has changed quickly. Now, interest rates are much higher than they were before. Interest rates often increase when prices are rising quickly. This rising price problem is called inflation. Central banks raise interest rates hoping to slow down inflation. They want to make prices stable again. While this decision might help control prices, it makes the national debt much more expensive to handle. Because the United Kingdom government has borrowed many billions of pounds, even a small increase in the interest rate costs a huge amount of money. The government must pay interest on all the debt it already has. This cost is extremely high now. Every single year, the government must find billions of pounds just to pay this interest. This money does not reduce the original debt amount. It only pays the banks and people who lent the money to the country. This high cost of borrowing has a major effect on the country's finances. Think about what the government could buy with these billions of pounds. That money could be used to hire more nurses or teachers. It could pay for better equipment in hospitals. It could help build new schools or improve roads across the country. But instead, this money is spent only on interest payments. High interest rates force the government to spend less on services that the public needs. It takes money away from important areas like healthcare and education. This reality shows the true cost of high debt. The government must always make sure it has enough money each year to pay the interest bill. This cost of borrowing is a major reason why the national debt is such a serious challenge today. 7. People live longer. We have looked at big unexpected events like saving banks and dealing with a virus. But some costs grow slowly over time. One big reason the government spends more money is that people in the country are living longer. This is very good news for the people. However, it means the population is getting older. The number of people over the age of 65 is growing quickly. This demographic change means the government must plan to spend much more money in the future than it does today. One major cost that increases is the state pension. When people retire from work, the government gives them a pension. This money helps them live after they stop earning a salary. If people live for 20 years after they stop working, the government pays for 20 years. If they live for 30 years, the government must pay for 30 years. Because people are living longer, the total cost of pensions keeps going up. Paying these pensions requires many billions of pounds each year. This is a huge and constant expense. Another very large cost is health care. Older people often need more medical care than younger people. They visit the National Health Service, or NHS, more often. They need more medicine, more operations, and more time in hospitals. The NHS must grow bigger to help everyone who needs it. The cost of running hospitals, paying doctors, and buying new equipment is already very high. When the population gets older, these costs increase greatly. The government must find this extra money. The government also helps pay for social care. This is help for people who need assistance with daily life, maybe at home or in a specialized care facility. As more people need this type of support, the cost of social care also rises. These three costs, pensions, healthcare, and social care, are necessary for society. The government cannot simply stop paying them. They are fixed costs that grow bigger every year because of the changing ages of the population. The government collects taxes from working people to pay for these services, but there are fewer working people for every retired person today than there were 40 years ago. This creates a financial gap. When the government spends more money on these essential services than it collects in tax, it must borrow money. This borrowing is a constant pressure on the national debt. It adds to the total amount owed year after year. This is a quiet, steady drain on the nation's finances, very different from the sudden shocks of a war or a pandemic. 8. Growing the economy. The government has many debts now. How can a country pay back such a big debt? The best answer is to make more money. When a country makes more money, we call this economic growth. Think of it like this. If your business sells more things every year, your business is growing. If the whole country sells more goods and services, the entire economy is growing. Economic growth is very important for the government's finances. When businesses are successful and people earn higher wages, they pay more tax. This extra tax money goes to the government. If the economy grows quickly, the government gets a large amount of extra tax money. This extra money can then be used to pay for important services, or it can be used to pay off the national debt, making the overall debt smaller. Recently, the United Kingdom's economy has been growing very slowly. It is not growing quickly enough. This slow growth is a big problem when the country already owes a lot of money. If the economy grows by only a small amount, the government only collects a small amount of extra tax money. This small amount is not enough to cover the high costs that have been created over the last 10 years, such as saving the banks or paying for the pandemic's support. A key part of economic growth is productivity. Productivity means how much work a person or a company can do in a certain amount of time. If productivity is high, it means people are making many things quickly and well. If productivity is low, it means the country is not making enough money from the work that is being done. Low productivity is one reason why economic growth is slow right now. Slow growth means the government faces a hard choice every time it needs money. Every year, the debt gets bigger because of costs like high interest rates on loans. If the economy grew fast, these costs would be much easier to manage. Fast growth acts like a safety net, quickly increasing the tax money available to the government. Because the income is not growing fast, the debt feels much heavier. The United Kingdom's debt is growing faster than its income. This means the country must often borrow even more money just to pay for today's needs, which adds to the debt problem. Many different things can make growth slow. Sometimes, businesses do not invest enough money in new technology. Sometimes, people do not have the right skills for the new jobs. The government must try to fix these issues to make the economy stronger. A stronger economy means more jobs, higher wages for workers, and most importantly, more tax money flowing into the national account. We have now looked at many reasons why the national debt is so high. It started with the financial problems of 2008. It grew during the time of the virus and the energy price crisis. Then, rising prices and high interest rates made the debt more expensive to manage. Finally, the slow rate of economic growth makes it very difficult to find the money needed to pay everything back. The government must find ways to increase productivity and make the economy grow faster. This is the main challenge for the future. Without fast growth, the United Kingdom will continue to spend a large part of its tax money just paying the interest on old debts, instead of spending that money on improving public services like hospitals and schools. Managing the nation's money requires careful planning and finding new ways to generate income through a healthy, growing economy.